The man gave out a surprised scream when he noticed the change in his face. Then he looked up at the bars of the ceiling around them. "Oh, this is your cage, eh?" he yelled out, and his face lit up. "You can't leave?" he said, and gave him a sympathetic look. "Well, maybe I don't want to leave," the crow said, in a desperate attempt to convince himself even more than the man. "I have all the books I need." He knew he needed the kiss of a virgin in order to turn back into a prince, but unfortunately he had been banned to a land where every girl he met had long lost her innocence. The time for fairy tales was over, and the prince was doomed to a life behind bars. The man disappeared and was followed by another visitor who repeated the ceremony and asked, "Do you want to sit?" The prince took his offering as well and drank the opiate that was supposed to make him forget the bars that surrounded him and make him believe he was free. But the medicine had long lost its potency, and the bars around the prince remained visible, since he knew that they were not erected in one particular spot, but surrounded him wherever he went, protecting him from his fellow human beings, but also disconnecting him from them. But maybe the book in his lap bore the answer. Maybe it could implant illusions in his head that were strong enough to make the bars translucent, or maybe even make them disappear completely. No man is an island. Maybe that meant that he should reach out to the mainland that he was supposedly a part of. Sid got out his phone and decided to call Phoebe, who had called him earlier and had told him they should meet after midnight when her work was done that she had to take care of in order to get her ticket. But when he reached her, their inability to orient themselves in these strange surroundings got the best of them. Phoebe told him she would call him back once she had found herself, and hung up. The next visitor offered the crows some herbs, but the prince refused and asked for information on their location instead. He had already gotten used to orienting around communist symbols and names after living in Berlin for 2 years. This task was actually quite simple and common, but on these grounds there were no longer street signs or streets, and so he had to rely on his plan instead. The man next to him pointed at a big white circle in the northeast and proclaimed, "We're in Neuland. Over there is the movie theater, and if you follow that way, you will return to the meadow." Sid thanked the man and informed Phoebe of his location. Then he took off his mask and looked at it for a while. The film for which they had made it had long been considered a failure by him, since it had not reached its main goal of getting his friend Juan into a school for cameramen. But now, as he put on the mask again, he realized that it had other benefits. Religion has some critical points, but it also has its benefits, the man next to him said. Well, I disagree, another man proclaimed, and the prince fled the tower as his friend called him and told him to meet her in the sand before the stage. He greeted her and the young man she was with. They began to talk, and soon Sid got lost in their words. He tried to get them to walk around for a while in order to be able to continue observing the scene, as was his duty as a gonzo reporter. When they finally came to a halt again, Sid ascended the grain structure they had sat down upon and lay down on the throne at its top. But as he sat there, the king began to feel sad, since his encounter with Phoebe had made him realize that even in this kingdom of equality, not everybody was happy without limitations. Phoebe had told him that she had to work quite a lot in order to get in, and that she did not enjoy it that much. Another illusion was shattered, and the prince ascended the throne that had become just another empty symbol. He asked them whether the little group should walk on to the next possibility to sit. On the way, Phoebe said, I wonder whether the crowd will be different now that they changed the way to get a ticket. Yeah, what about those who just aren't able to make a long-term commitment like that? The man that accompanied her, and whose name Sid didn't recall, said. Well, there are other ways to get in, and if it's jumping the fence, Sid said. But he wondered what labels you could use to describe the people who had gathered here for the next few days. I like the fact that people here take less alcohol and more other drugs. It makes them friendlier, Phoebe said, as they ascended the hill on which top the rocket had landed. But when Sid put on his mask and began to poke at the unicorn-shaped balloon next to him, the drunk man that held it yelled at him and gave him a threatening look. Luckily, he was no longer able to get up, and so Sid turned around again and said to Phoebe, well, maybe the crowd is different this year. They sat down, but just a few minutes later, Sid proclaimed, I have to return to the library. Do you want to go on your own? No, come along if you want to, the prince said, remembering the words that made him forget the prison bars of his all-too-human condition. When they passed a music machine around which a small crowd began to form, they were drawn in as well and began to lose themselves in the sounds for a while. But even as he danced, slowly losing himself in the crowd around him, he was still terribly aware that he was, after all, just a crow in a golden cage. All I do is reminisce our love, the voice in the music proclaimed, and Sid just had to move. After getting lost for a while, they finally returned to the cage of books. But when he put down his mask and declared that the crow was back in its cage, Phoebe said, You can leave this cage, though. They finally went off, and after saying goodbye, Sid returned to writing. "It really is a fusion," the girl in the group next to him said. They talked about how they had gotten here and seemed as if they had joined some kind of cult he had become part of as well. The three people began to develop more than just friendship with each other, and Sid had to get out. Had it been this culture of promiscuity that had led her to sleep with Jay, who had introduced her to this festival last year? Suddenly, he saw her everywhere he looked. He pulled down the crow's mask and told himself, "That was a different chapter. You're a crow now." And he went out not thinking about the past anymore, apart from the vague memory that you shouldn't kiss frogs since they might transform into something unpleasant, but just live in the present. Sid got up and began to walk towards his tent, but on his way he passed a deep voice that called out to him to tell him a story. He sat down behind a wall filled with eyes that seemed to jump out of it. Somehow it reminded him of his friend Samuel, who seemed like he had found himself over in the States. At least he kept repeating to him that he didn't suffer from all that pressure that seemed to weigh on his shoulders, and acted as if he wanted to persuade him to do all the things he was doing. Then he turned his typewriter back on in order to take control of the situation by writing poetry.